Mr. Purbaya, how do you see the potential of high interest rate stay longer due to stubborn high inflation in several countries, and the potential of economic recession following that high interest rate era?
Well, if I understand it correctly, the U.S. Central Bank is adamant in fighting inflation. They will likely to increase interest rate further, maybe by one more times. But even though their interest rate is at that high level, what I've seen over the last several months is basically they're changing their monetary policy. They're not really tightening their monetary policy, because if we look at the monetary base, it changed from negative 15 in March this year to close, slightly positive, close to 1% this year, meaning that they are starting to ease their monetary policy, meaning also that the U.S. economy is unlikely to fall into recession. For the Indonesian response, I think the central bank is following suit. They also hike interest rate quite significantly, now is at 5.75%. But what the world doesn't understand is that we have second policy rate, that is LPS, what we call a LPS policy rate, LPS guarantee rate, where when interest rate of a banking system is higher than that rate, we are not guaranteeing the fund. And that is more influencing the banking system compared to our central bank interest rate. So basically, even though the interest rate of our central bank increased to 5.75%, but because we are not increasing our interest rate, relatively stay at the low level of 3.5 and then increase it very slowly to 4.25, the economy can still breathe. So I don't have to go to the IMF to say what to do, but because we have already finding a way to mitigate the impact of the increase in the Fed interest rate. That is inspired by him also. 20 years ago, he lectured me on how to understand the economy. Until now, it lingers in my mind perfectly. Thank you very much,
Mr. Purbaya.
Professor.
But talking about the high interest rate era, do you think it will affect the financial market in developing countries, especially Indonesia, considering we have seen the capital outflow in equity and bond market recently?
Well, initially, yes, because people thought maybe the central bank will hike interest rate further, and also as a result, the bond yields will increase. That will create potential capital loss for foreign bond investor in the country, so they move out because they are afraid of that. They're trying to reduce the loss. But our central bank is also a bit smart. If you remember correctly, early 2020, they let interest rate, the bond yield, 10-year bond yield government to increase to 8%. But after that, they reduced it to 6.5%. 2022, they increased it again to 7%. That's caused capital outflow, and weakening of the rupiah. But recently, they reduced again the bond yield to close to 6.4%. And this level is not that different compared to the pre-COVID-19 level. I believe with that, when the market understands about that, they will come back to invest in our country. And considering that we maintain the market rate at the low level, meaning that the potential economic growth is there, they will come back to us again, because investors tend to invest in a country where give a high GDP prospect.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Purbaya. And now, Mr. Joe. Many countries are trying to abandon their dependence on the US dollar, one of which was initiated by the Asian countries, also the BRICS. Is this method effective in strengthening the economic resilience of Asian and BRICS countries?
Well, I think the world has been very dependent on the dollar. The dollar plays multiple roles. It's a store of value, it's a unit of account, it's a unit in which trade transactions occurs. In each of these roles, there are different issues at stake. So for instance, as a reserve currency, there's not really any good substitute. That a lot of people would say, oh, I'd like not to keep my money in dollars, but they look at Europe and they say, well, the euro has had some big problems, the euro crisis. They don't want to put their money in China. Japan is too small. So in fact, as a default, the dollar is going to remain as the strongest and most important reserve currency. But in terms of transactions and how you denominate transactions, the fact is that China is a much larger role in trade even than the United States. And so I think there's a natural evolution away from a lot of trade being denominated in dollars towards other currencies. And I think the efforts that are being made, for instance, at this ASEAN meeting to make it facilitate that kind of framework of having transactions more easily done in other currencies is a good thing. I think there are many advantages, both in terms of transaction costs and also risk, by having transactions denominated in other currencies.
So the ease of the transaction itself.
That's right.
Okay, thank you so much. And then Mr. Purbaya, do you think the Asian collaboration in financial sector could reduce the negative impact from the high interest rate trend in several developed countries for now?
Well, the collaboration of Asian countries in that area is pretty weak. In the past, they have this Chiang Mai initiative, and then improve it to CMM. I don't know about that, but the implementation is not that strong, and the system has not been tested. So that I can say that in this stage, we cannot really mitigate the impact of high interest rate in the US to the rupiah, or to the rupiah, to the local currency. But recently, or yesterday, we just launched this LCT, local currency transaction. That is bilateral swap agreement, implementation of bilateral swap agreement between Indonesia and China, and Korea, with Japan, and also with Malaysia and some ASEAN countries. The amount of transaction is not that much compared to the actual trade that we are conducting. It's close to $3.7 billion. It's only 1% of the overall trade, but it is a starting. It's a good start. I think next year it will be increasing further and further. I hope if we can promote it successfully, to some extent, we can reduce the impact of the fluctuation or uncertainty in the US policy.
Or this